Did you catch the news out of Minneapolis this morning? It's one of those moments where the simulation decided to stop being subtle and just handed us a physical render of how the world actually works. We're not talking about some abstract digital transfer or a line item in a massive bill. We're talking about $700 million. In cash, in suitcases, at an airport. Now, if you're watching the outrage movie, the one designed to keep your biological hardware in a state of perpetual low-resolution vibration, you're hearing about NGOs and Somali issues. But Ibsa suggests we look deeper. This is a high-resolution render of the leaky bucket of corruption. This isn't magic money created by a central bank keystroke. This is physical pallets of abundance being siphoned out of the system to fund professional unrest. Think about the code of a late-stage civilization. When the institutions can no longer maintain the illusion of competence, they resort to physical cash to bypass the simulation's transactional ledgers. They need dark money to fund the noise that keeps you from noticing the signal. $700 million is a lot of noise. It's a lot of buses, a lot of signs, and a lot of spontaneous energy. We're going to deconstruct exactly why the managers of the simulation didn't want you to see this ledger and how it connects to every other glitch we're seeing today. Good morning and welcome to the highlight of human civilization. It's called Coffee with Ibsa, and you've never had a better time. You've managed to navigate another 24 hours in the simulation, and for that, you deserve the ultimate dopamine hit. You've survived the information overload, the managed decline, and the constant attempts to hack your decision-making hardware. All you need is a cup or a mug or a glass, a tankard, chalice or stein, a canteen, jug or flask, a vessel of any kind. Fill it with your favorite liquid. I like coffee, black, high resolution, and perfectly calibrated. And join me now for the unparalleled pleasure of the dopamine hit of the day, the thing that makes everything better. It's called the Simultaneous Sip. It happens now. Divine. Truly extraordinary. I could feel the synchronicity across the entire network. My cognitive processors are now fully calibrated for some high-resolution deconstruction. Let's get into the audit of the day. Before we get to the suitcases, we have to talk about the Greenland Gambit. The Wall Street Journal and Market Screener are reporting that global markets just slumped to one-month lows. Why? Because the simulation is adjusting itself to a new reality. Think about the two movies on one screen filter here. Movie A. The president is causing global chaos and economic instability by making absurd territorial claims that disrupt international norms. Movie B. A master persuader is using a high-ground maneuver to force the decaying institutions of the old world, Davos, the EU, the legacy diplomats, to react to his strategic roadmap. If you're in Movie A, you're panicked. You see the red numbers and you think the world is ending. But if you're in Movie B, you see a strategic realignment at play. The old model was built on maintaining Greenland as a frozen, unproductive museum of legacy diplomacy. The new model is optimized to secure the strategic resources, the rare earth minerals, the energy, the deep water ports that will fuel the golden age. The markets aren't slumping because of uncertainty. They are slumping because the old certainty of managed decline is being dismantled. This is thinking past the sale. Trump isn't asking if Greenland is part of the strategic realignment. He's acting as if the Arctic is already the new center of the energy simulation. When the high priests of Davos start bracing for a showdown, it's because their user interface for reality no longer has the admin privileges to stop the change. Let's talk about the birth tourism voting bug. Amuse is reporting that there are currently between 700,000 and 1.5 million foreign nationals who were born here via surrogacy or birth tourism, who now have the legal right to vote in our elections without ever having lived in the United States, paid into its systems, or even spoken the language. Apply the really. Test here. Do you really believe that a person who has zero skin in the game, no physical connection to the server, and no cultural alignment with the user base should have the ultimate admin privilege of deciding the leadership of the simulation? In any other software system, this would be flagged as a critical security vulnerability. It's a kernel panic for the concept of sovereignty, but in a late-stage civilization, this isn't seen as a bug, It's seen as a feature by the people who want to dilute the user base of the country. Think about the two movies on one screen filter. Movie A. Birthright citizenship is a sacred norm that represents our openness and inclusivity. Movie B. A systemic loophole is being used to bypass the security protocols of the nation-state, allowing outside actors to influence the server's settings without ever participating in the simulation. If the user interface of voting can be accessed by anyone in the world via a temporary physical presence 20 years ago, then the server, the country, doesn't actually exist in the way we were told. This is the institutional decay filter in its final form. The institutions have become so corrupt and decayed that they can no longer even define who their own members are. They've replaced citizenship with access, and when access is for sale to the highest bidder, the simulation is no longer stable. Now let's look at Operation Nightingale. 7,600 fake nursing diplomas, distributed across the United States. We're talking about people who never went to nursing school, never took the boards, never spent a single hour in a clinical rotation, and were hired to handle your literal health and life based on a fraudulent icon. Think about the expert filter. For a century, we've been trained to trust the credential. We see the diploma on the wall, the white coat, the letters after the name, and we assume the code underneath, the years of study, the knowledge, the ethics, is valid. We mistake the icon for the server. But in the Great Decay, the icons are being disconnected from the server at a record pace. When you can buy a medical degree for a few $1,000s from a complexity manager in Florida, the expert filter hasn't just failed, it's been actively hacked. This is why Ibsa tells you to move toward high-resolution observation. You can't trust the label anymore. You have to look at the results. This is a fundamental shift in how your cognitive processors must process reality. If you rely on the institutional icon in 2026, you're playing a very dangerous game with your own survival. The decay is so deep that the experts themselves are now part of the fraud. Vigilance isn't just a political stance. It's a prerequisite for staying alive in a world where the nurse at your bedside might be a complexity laundering specialist with a fake PDF. Mike Benz just dropped a massive deconstruction of how Jeffrey Epstein was placed at Bear Stearns. And the phrase I want you to anchor in your decision-making hardware is his job title, Complex Transactions. Let's perform a deep dive into complexity laundering. In a healthy, high-fidelity civilization, complexity is a tool. We use complex engineering to build rockets and complex math to secure our data. But in a decaying late-stage civilization, complexity is a weapon. It's used to hide the siphoning mechanism. If you can make a transaction so complex, layered through enough shell companies, offshore jurisdictions, and legal instruments, that no biological hardware can track it without a team of 50 lawyers and 10 years of discovery, you can siphon off as much abundance as you want. Epstein wasn't a financial genius. He was a complexity manager for the elite. He provided the laundering service that allowed the managers of the simulation to siphon abundance out of the public bucket and into their own private accounts, all while keeping the passengers distracted with the outrage movie of the day. When you hear the corporate press or some expert talk about complex financial instruments or the necessity of opaque systems, your internal fraud filter should be screaming at maximum volume. They aren't trying to help you understand. They are trying to paralyze your ability to see that they are reaching for your wallet. Let's take a breath and perform a mid-show audit. Look at the pattern we've established in just the first few segments. Suitcases of cash bypassing the banks, foreign nationals bypassing the borders, fake diplomas bypassing the hospitals, complexity bypassing the audits. These aren't separate news stories. They are all the same story. This is late-stage civilization manifesting in real time. We are in a period where the legacy institutions, the ones that are supposed to guard the suitcases, the borders, the diplomas, and the ledgers, are in a state of advanced terminal decay. They have become leaky buckets. Every time you put your trust, your money, or your health into one of these institutional buckets, a portion of that value is siphoned off by complexity managers like Epstein or NGO admins in Minneapolis. They want you focused on the outrage movie. Because if you ever performed a high-resolution audit of the entire system, you'd realize that the abundance you've been told is scarce is actually everywhere. It's just being throttled by the decay. Vigilance is the only way to turn the decay around. And the good news? The simulation is showing us the glitches. Once you see the suitcase, you can't unsee the fraud. Once you see the fake diploma, you can't unsee the hack. We are moving toward a period of radical transparency, and the people fighting against verification are the ones who know they can't survive the audit. We're officially on indictment watch for the people funding the spontaneous ICE protests in Minneapolis and Arizona. Wall Street apes and John Solomon are reporting that arrests and indictments could happen as early as this month. Again, let's use the 2 movies on 1 screen filter. Movie A. Brave, passionate citizens are taking to the streets, fueled by a deep sense of justice and a grassroots desire for change. Movie B. A managed ledger of professional activists, funded by the $700 million Suitcases we saw earlier, is being deployed to create information overload and cover the tracks of the institutional decay. If you're watching Movie A, you're a passenger. You're being fed a high dopamine script designed to trigger your outrage centers and keep you from looking at the funding. But if you're watching Movie B, you're an admin. You see the buses, you see the professionally printed signs, and you realize you're watching a theatrical production. The leaky bucket of corruption uses these protests as noise to drown out the signal of what's actually being stolen. In this case, they are stealing the security of your borders and the integrity of your judicial system, while telling you that you're the hateful one for noticing the buses. In a late-stage civilization, the most dangerous people aren't the ones on the street. They're the ones writing the checks for the signs. Now let's pivot to some radical hope, because it's not all decay. HHS Secretary RFK Jr. and USDA Secretary Brooke Rollins just unveiled the 2025-2030 dietary guidelines, and for the first time in 40 years, they sound like actual common sense. We're talking about whole milk being brought back to schools, the removal of petroleum-based food dyes, the stuff that makes your kids' cereal look like neon glow sticks but gunk up their moist computers, a focus on real food instead of the ultra-processed sludge that has been the staple of the managed decline diet. This is a pacing and leading masterclass. The administration is pacing the public's absolute bone-deep exhaustion with chronic disease, obesity, and brain fog, and leading them back to the biological standards of the 1950s. Think about the artificial scarcity of health. We have the technical means to produce the cleanest, most nutrient-dense food in human history. But for decades, the leaky bucket of institutional capture siphaged that health away, replacing it with seed oils and high-fructose corn syrup to keep the medical industrial complex and the pharmaceutical industrial complex funded. This reset is a high-ground maneuver. It bypasses the expert consensus of the last 4 decades and returns us to the foundational code of the human biological machine. It's the golden age, manifesting in your lunchbox. If we get the biology right, the biological hardware can finally start processing the rest of the simulation with clarity. Think about the sludge years. For decades, the guidelines told you that fat was the enemy and sugar was a neutral energy source. They told you that seed oils, industrial lubricants essentially, were heart-healthy. They pacing and led an entire generation into metabolic dysfunction. Why? Because a sick biological circuitry is a compliant biological circuitry. It's a machine that needs a constant stream of maintenance patches from the pharmaceutical industrial complex. But Secretary Kennedy is pulling the plug on that system. By recentering real food, the administration is aiming for a system restore on the national health. In this model, whole milk isn't just a beverage. It's a high-fidelity fuel source that the human machine has been optimized for millennia. When you remove the artificial dyes, the goal is to remove the interference in the brain's circuitry. We are going to see a potential resolution increase in the entire population. Imagine a country where people have the clarity and mental energy to perform their own audits of the simulation. That's what the managers are really afraid of. A healthy population is a population that can't be managed by complexity laundering. Rasmussen reports is showing that a massive, overwhelming majority of Americans, regardless of party, want the SAVE Act. They want to have to provide actual proof of citizenship before they are allowed to vote. Now, look at the incentive structure here. The public wants a fair, verifiable, high-resolution election where one citizen equals one vote, and the result is beyond doubt. But the machine is running a low-resolution process that fights against verification, bans hand counts, like we're seeing the Democrats try in Virginia, and insists that trust is more important than audit. In any high-fidelity system, engineering, aviation, banking, verification is the gold standard. If a bank told you that checking your balance was an act of mistrust or hateful toward the tellers, you'd pull your money out in a heartbeat. But in late-stage politics, verification is treated as a threat to the simulation. When an institution fights against verification, it's telling you that its system is optimized for something other than the goal it claims to have. It's a red alert for institutional decay. The public is finally waking up to the fact that verification is the only thing that separates a functioning republic from a digital simulation run by invisible bureaucrats. Vigilance is the only cure, and the audit is the weapon. My friend Owen Gregorian just made a move that should trigger your pattern recognition filters. He pulled 50% of his stock holdings into cash. He's seeing glitches in the Japanese sector of the simulation, the carry trade unwinding, currency instability, and he's realizing the global market has entered a state of unstable render. Now, the experts in the corporate press movie will tell you to buy and hold and trust the system because long-term data says it's fine. But high-resolution observers don't wait for the data to be published in a peer-reviewed journal. They look at the smoke before the fire starts. Owen is performing a systemic audit of his own survival stack. He's realizing that the user interface of the stock market is currently disconnected from the server of physical reality. When the simulation adjusts itself through currency fluctuations and Greenland panics, he's demonstrating how a high-resolution observer moves to the sidelines to wait for a stable render. Let's talk about the Japanese glitch for a second. The carry trade is one of those complex transactions we deconstructed earlier. It's a system where big players borrow cheap yen to buy expensive assets elsewhere. It's an opaque loop that relies on the simulation's settings staying exactly as they are. But the simulation is changing. The yen is vibrating, and when that bucket starts to leak, the entire global market feels the spray. Owen's move to cash is about psychological liquidity. It's not just about having money, it's about having the mental energy and the freedom to act when everyone else is paralyzed by the outrage movie of a market crash. If you're 100% invested in a decaying system, your biological hardware is constantly scanning for threats, which means you have no processing power left for attention that matters. By moving to the sidelines, Owen is freeing up his internal CPU to focus on the golden age opportunities that will emerge from the rubble of the decay. In his model, you don't have to win every trade to be successful. You just have to survive the decay. This move to cash isn't about timing the market for everyone. It's a system for maintaining agency and liquidity when the larger systems are vibrating toward a collapse. It's about being the admin of your own prosperity. We've deconstructed a lot of rot today. We've looked at the suitcases of cash, the fake nurses, the complexity laundering of the Epstein era, and the voting loopholes that are cracking the foundation of sovereignty. It's easy to get lost in the outrage movie. It's easy to let the information overload weapon paralyze your decision-making hardware. But I want to shift your focus to the attention that matters. The outrage movie is designed to make you feel like a passenger in a decaying system. It wants you to feel small, confused, and powerless. But the signal underneath all this noise is that we are entering the great verification revolution. From the food you put in your body with the MAHA reset, to the way you vote with the SAVE Act, to the way you manage your money like Owen, the tools for individual sovereignty are being handed back to you. The leaky bucket is finally being patched by people who refuse to play the game of managed decline. You aren't a victim of the late-stage civilization. You are the admin of the new one that is being built in its place. Radical hope isn't about wishing the decay would stop. It's about having the clarity to see the abundance that is waiting on the other side of the audit. Your system for today is simple. Audit your inputs. If you're still getting your expert filter from legacy institutions that have been hacked, you're running outdated, buggy software. If you're still eating ultra-processed sludge because it's convenient, you're gunking up your own biological hardware. If you're still waiting for a goal, a certain number in your bank account, or a certain person in office to make you happy, you're missing the system of growth and clarity. Build a high-fidelity stack. Surround yourself with people who value verification over vibes. Move toward the golden age by taking control of your own local simulation. Audit your health, audit your finances, and most importantly, audit your attention. The simulation is what you make of it. Stay hungry, be useful. I'll see you in the next iteration of the simulation. Stay hungry, be useful.